Water is one of the elements of life that we need for life. That's why it's the woman's element. I remember growing up, I didn't think I was that different until I started going to school. I truly believe in this role. I am a storyteller. The fire, the water, the air, and the earth. Those four things are honored in everything we do. It's the Indigenous way that gave me my life back.
Hey everyone, welcome to the final episode of the Voices of Resilience podcast for season 1. Today we're sitting down with local elder and Indigenous children's book author Theresa Corky Larsen-Jonasson. I've heard many stories about Corky since starting this podcast and have been looking very forward to this episode specifically. It's a perfect synchronization that we get to end off the season with talking to Corky. In this episode, Theresa is going to share a little bit about her own journey growing up in Red Deer and her journey connecting herself with the identity of being an elder and really understanding the role that she has to play on this planet for our future generations. She also reminds us of the importance that water plays on our Indigenous communities and makes the sacred connection that water has towards our Indigenous women and towards creation in general. Please enjoy the episode. Hi. Thank you for having us down here today for your reading. Would you like to share a little bit about why we're here at the library here and what happened?
Yes, and I'm really happy because I think it went really well, and I really love. I think I'm a natural storyteller, but I just caution people to take my stories with a grain of salt. And that I kind of make some things as I go, but some of the important ones, I really make sure I capture the teaching behind it. But the Red Deer Public Library asked me to come and do a storytelling event. They're having different cultural events at this time of the year, the winter solstice. And this is a very meaningful time for us. As an Indigenous person, this is a really special time. And I believe next week they're going to do Kwanzaa, and then in the new year, a Ukrainian New Year. So today, I told stories mostly for a child's entertainment about solstice and the way all the elements of life come together and ultimately are our greatest teachers and our greatest storytellers.
I love all of that. And I was there to sit with through the whole reading as well, and it's obviously this is for the kids and stuff like that, but there were a lot of adults that were laughing too.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, a lot of our different Indigenous teachings it's up for interpretation, right? So yeah. And I love the way that you connected everything with the landmarks that are in town here too. I think that was really a great way to connect to the kids.
And I didn't know, is there a copyright behind that or so?
Whatever.
Yeah. Exactly.
Who's gonna come at you in Red Deer? Yeah. Well, I'd love to just dive right into it and get some of your own background with your own Indigenous teachings and what led you to the importance that you find with water in general, and we'll get into that in a little bit.
All right.
Let's touch on a bit of your own journey with
my own journey.
Yeah.
I told the audience here today, I am Red Deer born and raised, and I remember growing up. I didn't think I was that different until I started going to school. And that's where I went, and I started noticing that my skin was a little bit darker than some of them. And their families weren't like my family, if we had sleepovers or that. And if I didn't see that myself, others were very quick to tell me. Red Deer was a hard place to grow up, being somewhat different. And I honestly see now as a mother myself how my mother tried to protect me and my parents. So that being said, I have family in Musqueam, Samson Band. They carry the name Potts. My great-grandmother was a Potts. My grandmother was a Fraser, and she married a man with the last name of Joseph. And on my father's side, it's Larsen, a Danish surname. And I'm very, very proud of both of my heritages. Okay, I carry both of those, that blood that runs in my veins. I love it. I care very deeply for both. For me, however, it's the Indigenous way that gave me my life back. Okay, and teachings that were hidden, teachings that were kept, languages that weren't spoken, songs that weren't sung, because now I know why. You know, some of it was out of protection, that our elders didn't want what happened to them to happen to us as children.
Mm-hmm.
But as I started getting older and finding a truer sense of my voice, I realized people that I have lived with in this community all my life never knew anything about this side of me. And I was very, very good at keeping it hidden. But as I get older and prouder and more confident, I find people are coming up and going, I never knew that about you. And even some of them are coming up and apologizing, you know, for things that happened when we were young. And but I truly believe as that every person is born with a gift. I kind of think I know what your gift is too. But every person is born with the gift, and they might know it right away, or they might have to wait till they get older for it to come to them. I believe, as I find my voice, and I didn't have a voice. When I was young, I didn't have a voice.
Yeah.
I was very quiet, very shy. Don't ask me questions. Don't point me out, which obviously was very different from what you see today. Now, I love being the center of attention. I love telling the stories. I love BSing a little bit and having fun. But I find one thing about finding your voice, and I tell this to young people all the time, you all have a voice and you all have a right to use it. But you also have a responsibility to use it in a good way first. Try to use it in a good way first. Because if you start, you know, if you're angry all the time or fighting or mad or use your voice in anger, pretty soon people are just going to walk away from you.
Yeah.
Okay? And they're not going to want to be around you. So if you have something very meaningful to say, you know, try kindness first. I truly believe in this role where I have found my voice and I am storyteller. I believe I see myself as a bridge from the non-Indigenous community to the Indigenous community and back. That's something that I have a gift of doing. I can meld into both. Okay, and as a self-proclaimed clown, okay, and in our way, the clown is has a lot of teachings behind it. I try to teach with humor because the elder who adopted my husband and I, he taught us with humor and he taught us with love. So I always try to do that first. And the only time I really learned from him, the only time he would ever raise his voice was if he had to tell you more than 2 or 3 times. Then you feel a little bit of edge. And so I feel that is my role in this community. And that's what my husband and I have strived to do from day one. Indigenous awareness. First it was called Aboriginal awareness. Then, you know, First Nations awareness. And now we say Indigenous awareness. And I really think we've done good in this community, you know, and, you know, but that being said, there's also times where I felt like we've taken great big steps back.
Yeah.
So I think it's just something we're all always going to have to work on. It's not going to come quick. We're trying, and I see people who are trying.
Yeah.
You know, things like this. This wouldn't have happened in the museum 15, 20 years ago.
No,
It wouldn't have
absolutely not.
happened.
Yeah.
Even schools, going into schools, or, you know, we're asked to go into the hospitals to sit with police in police stations, with the mayor and council. That wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And now it's happening all over.
You know, even the excitement that you end up seeing from the youth that are Indigenous,
Mm-hmm.
taking up those mantles and being curious about their going to all these different events and stuff like that. That wouldn't have even happened a few years ago either, right? So there are big steps forward, but just like you said, there's a lot of steps backwards as well, and it's hard trying to. We talk about this a lot on the podcast, but it's hard holding that space of healing and awareness, and not also feeling like you are on a stage for theater as well, right? So finding that fine balance is going to be something that, as an Indigenous person, that we're always going to have to walk, right? So
yeah.
Yeah.
And I find the older I get, I can't. I'm past the activist part of my life now. Like I find. Because I can use my voice. I can, and it'll come out sharp if it needs to. If I see injustice or something not being fair, my voice can get very, very sharp. But I find then for a few days after, I'm like, holy, you know, I'm down for the count. So I have learned that, and I've also learned I can't do so much the fight anymore. Like organize the water walks or organize for the missing and murdered Indigenous people. But I can help in other ways. And how I do that now as an older person is with my prayer and my pipe and listening and speaking if asked to speak. Yeah.
Well, you know, there's a place, like just like with our elements, there's a place for the fire, right? And there's also a place for the water, but choosing the fight will take years off of you.
Yeah, it will.
So having that wisdom to understand that you need to morally choose your battles. It's the difference between your heart brain and your brain, right? Yeah. All the knowledge on the planet doesn't matter if you don't have the wisdom to know how to use it for it.
Absolutely. Right? And I remember my teacher, George, he, you know, back in the day, he goes, you can't be a politician and a spiritual person. Yeah. You can't do both. People will try, but it'll never work out. You have to do one or the other. And I've decided to, you know, count on the ceremonies and share the ceremonies as I'm able.
Yeah. And the way that you hold yourself through those ceremonies is also beautiful. It's I've heard so much about you through the community since starting this podcast, and it's so exciting to finally have you on here as well.
Oh, good.
To end off the season. Yeah. And I just want to say I love all your jokes.
And you do good stuff too, Tyler.
Oh, thank you.
I've watched some of your stuff and I'm going, this guy is going places.
Oh, thank you so much. So there's a few things that I'd love to touch on. So the wisdom we just touched on, but with your teachings, bringing you up to this point, and finding the significance within your teachings to connect with water on such a heavy level. Would you like to touch on how that?
Oh, okay. So it's a very, very deep teaching.
Yeah.
And why we have to fight for our water, and why so many people are standing up for water and locking arms together and doing it nation to nation. Sometimes you'll see. For me, what I always teach the younger people is that water is the very, very first element we come to know. Right from the minute inside of our mom, where we are conceived, that little egg is fertilized. For the next 9 months, we're floating in a very warm, nutritious water, safe. And 9 months later, all of a sudden, you will hear someone go, oh my goodness, her water broke, or it's time. And that water helps the new life come in, okay? So water also, for us as humans, I'll tell you something. The first time I ever fasted, did a spiritual fast, I went without food and water for 3 nights, 4 days. Food, Okay, I got a lot of reserves. That didn't bother me too much. Loneliness kind of got to me. It was the water that almost drove me mad, thinking about that water. And my very first fast, that is where I learned how important water was. And I got gifted a vision of seeing how important it was and how quickly it can be taken away if we continue to do some of the things we do. So water is one of the elements of life that we need for life. Not just you or me, but our pets, the people in Africa, to the people in the Northwest Territories. Water is one of our elements of life. And one of our elements of life we should never, ever have to pay for. Ever. There should never, ever be money. It's that sacred. But you find that now. People are paying for water.
Yeah.
People, you go to Las Vegas, you're paying $10 for a bottle of water. And I remember listening at a healing gathering to a whole group of old elders, and they were sitting and they were talking. They were talking about water, and one of them shared a prophecy and said there's going to come a time when people are going to fight about water, and they're going to pay more for water than they do for a cup of coffee. And this was back in the 80s. And I remember thinking, that's not right. Look at all our lakes. You got Sylvan Lake, Pine Lake. You go to a tap, water comes out. We have water.
Yeah.
But that's one thing that has come true.
Yeah.
People are paying some places $10 for a bottle of water.
Yeah.
Where a coffee is $1 or $2. So the teachings behind water is how precious it is, that it's one of the elements of life. And one thing that I learned from my kukum, when we used to smudge and pray together at my house, she would always have a little glass of water. And that's one thing I continue to do now too. If I go somewhere, if I have to do teachings, I'll make sure there's water. Just so I can remember, about that. And that's why it's the woman's element. Because of that 9 months that the baby's being carried in that fluid, because of when that water breaks and helps a new life come to, women are very, very connected to the water. And that's who you will see when the water is at risk. In the recent time, it has been the woman who've stood up. And, but, not without support from the male side of life.
It takes a community and that balance.
It takes a
between the
community.
two,
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. The same thing when you look at our elements on the medicine wheel in general, it's to teach that balance and the constant flow that each element needs in order to create life. So hearing you talk about the connection to the womb and to women when it comes to water, that's the women are the closest to our creation, right? The closest to creator, right? So it makes sense that it would be connected to the water.
In our way, we call them life givers. New life comes through the woman.
Yeah.
But it also has to have a man involved. It's all about balance and give and take and
absolutely
and sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What has led you to pay such close attention within your own teachings? And if you could give us some of the different ways that you've put this on the forefront of connecting women to water and connecting water to sustainability, what we can do to help fix it.
The way I've shared the teachings, and it's not just me that share the teachings, there's a lot of women who have been working this way on the forefront for a long, long time. Josephine Mandaman carried a copper bucket of water across Canada, and she was one of the ones where she didn't just talk about it, she acted it. And she stopped at each lake, each river, and she would stop and pray with this little copper pail. And she was old, and she was kind of rickety, and she had a hard time. And when a younger woman sees an older woman do that, it's like, first you want to go, let her rest. We should be doing this. Or why is this old lady doing this? Why aren't we helping her? And gradually that line of women behind her became greater and greater, and then branched off to where other people were doing their own water walks. We've done our own water walks here. You know, when Standing Rock happened in the States, they wanted to take, you know, that oil, pipeline right through their sacred lands, would disrupt their water. You've seen what happened.
Yeah.
People from all over the world came and stood beside them,
Mm-hmm.
from the Sami to the Africans to, you know, people of the Condor. And
it takes the people.
it takes a
to actually make the
community.
movement,
Not
right?
one person can do it all.
Absolutely.
And then expect to sit back and bask in the glory.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
No, I think we live in a time of constant comfortability for the sake of our, like, we forget that we're giving up a lot of our own identities and our own securities for these sort of things that make our lives easier, right? And it can be really easy to just expect someone else to do it. When you see an elder, when you see someone much older than you that shouldn't be doing these things, it really forces you into that perspective of your own abilities, or your own capabilities, right? We live in an age of individuality. It's really hard to remember that we can come together and really make these changes happen, right? So.
Yeah, and because I was taught that way, to respect your elders, I taught my son that. You know, if you ever see an older person carrying something and they need help. Doesn't matter if you know them or not.
Yeah.
If you're on a bus and they need a seat, you give them that seat.
Yeah,
you know?
There doesn't need to be that disconnection.
Yeah.
And I think striking those conversations with your elders and the ones that are older than you, that's the first point of knowledge that you need to go for, not these things that are in our pockets, right? So,
yeah.
Yeah. Something I would really like to touch on before this conversation, when you were talking about your upbringing, was how much of what you went through, going through grade school and growing up, really connected with what both I've went through, being someone of a darker skin, someone with Indigenous blood in my system, not feeling safe enough to identify myself as that growing up up until this point. And, you know, there's been so many other people that I've come in contact with, kids and older folk, people much older than me, that have also connected to that too, right? And it's, you forget these stories of these elders that you look up to, that you respect, that they went through at a younger age, and it just comes from having those conversations, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Are there any other specific ceremonies or teachings that you'd like to relay in regards to holding the importance of our water?
Yes, we do a water ceremony. We try to do that as on World Water Day, or sometimes in the spring, or sometimes in the fall. And what we do, and I don't know, did you see that water ceremony we did at the river earlier this year?
No, I wasn't a part of that one.
Okay, so we got asked to do a water ceremony, and what we do is we take a little pail, and we got one of the young people. We always make sure we try to put the young people in front to go dip, give some tobacco, and then bring a pail of water back. And what happens with that, we pray for our water, in that each person will scoop up water from the pail when the pail comes to them, say their prayer to the water, and let it go back in. And it goes around and around, and then at the end, we take it back to the river. And we've done that at our Red Deer River many, many times. And I don't think people know that we do that, but we just do it. Because the way Lynn and I live our life, it's all according to ceremony in the years, and the way the year is going. And we know certain times we're going to do this. We know certain time that the sings for the Sundance are going to start. And the sundances, there should be no sundances. We've learned this until that first little leaf comes out on the tree. And then all dances have to be done by the time that first little leaf turns yellow. So it's all according to nature. And I never knew that as a young person. I was taught that, from George as I grew up, or got to know more about how all the ceremonies go with the cycle.
Yeah.
And how important the fire, the water, the air, and the earth. those 4 things are honored in everything we do.
Yeah.
4 things, for the 4 elements of life that every living thing, every living being on this earth needs.
Yeah.
You know, and those are the things we have to protect.
Mm-hmm.
But our air, you know, we see so many people on puffers now. Our water is becoming compromised. You know, I never believed it when they said people will start arguing about water. It's happening.
Yeah.
People will fight big fights about water. People are running out of water.
Mm-hmm.
Las Vegas gets all their water to come down to them, you know, through the Columbia River that starts in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And I went down there and I was watching this lady, how she watered her lawn. You know, we'll have the sprinkler going back and forth like this. The way she watered her lawn flowers was a little bubble of water came out every 3 seconds. And that's how she had to water her lawn, because the water is that scarce already down there. And that really scared me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I seen that, that really bothered me.
Yeah.
You know, I love water. You know, I love swimming. Our parents used to take us to Pine Lake and Sylvan Lake and around here. And water was just natural and free and fun and there.
Yeah.
Now we're at a place where we worry. Was Sylvan Lake even swimmable last year? Was Gull Lake? It wasn't.
Yeah.
Pigeon Lake, couldn't swim in it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because of the way things are getting out of balance. That algae is, it's become unbalanced.
Yeah.
It all used to be balanced. Now it's unbalanced.
Yeah, with the constant mistreatment of our water, right? And then even now we're seeing, even in our bottled waters, we're understanding the science is catching up to the point where we're understanding that our plastic bottled water isn't safe either. There's microplastics that are a thing that we need to worry about. A lot of people that I know drink water from the tap too, and I know personally with where I live, I can't trust the tap water that's coming out. I can't trust if the city is maintaining those pipes to the standard that they should be for clean drinking water, right?
Yeah, I was lucky. I grew up with a well. Where our acreage was, we had a well, and the old people called that kind of water live water.
Mm-hmm.
So it might have a little microorganisms here and there and that, but they all worked, you know, whereas the water that comes out of the tap is so heavily treated and cleansed and bleached and fluorided. It's not a live water.
Things that aren't known to your body, right? Like our bodies are filled with water and microorganisms as well, right?
And we need those microorganisms,
right?
Yeah, we do. Our biome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I know some Indigenous people still to this day that the first thing they do in the spring, they'll eat a small, tiny spoonful of dirt because that's how much their land means to them and how much they have received from it.
Yeah.
And they believe that little tiny bit of dirt that they bring into themselves is, you know, it's a part of them, and your DNA is there, and it's a part of the earth is a part of them, and that's how they honor it.
Yeah. I think understanding that flow too helps you reclimatize to the different seasons and flow along with the different seasons, right? Like up until I started understanding that for myself and how I mirror that through my life, the change of the seasons was always super hard for me. I was constantly resisting those changes, right? And it would make the winter so much harder to really understand and get into and stuff. And, I'd love to touch again on, you said earlier that this time of the year is so important for our people. Would you like to accentuate a little bit on why the importance is for this season?
Okay, so the way I understand solstice is, again, because it's a harder time to travel, it's cold. You know, our ancestors, to travel from here to Pinoka, they would have to hitch up a team, you know, horses and wagon, and it wasn't in a nice toasty car with a heater.
Yeah.
It was hard, you know. So I always read and learned that this time of the year, the winter, they would stay closer to home. They would stay closer to home. Maybe at Christmas was a grand time. People would do a lot of visiting and eating and dancing, just like is done now. But it was also a time where you stayed home and you kind of went inward.
Yeah.
And sometimes going inward and when it's just you for a little while, your mind, you start thinking about things. And some of those things you don't like, you know? And it's a time where you would go, okay, but I've learned from it. What am I going to do different? What am I going to do different next year or in the spring? What am I going to do different at the next Sundance? Or what am I going to do so I don't feel like that again with that person? The time of now is really about being inward. And sometimes when it was just you and your family in that little shack or that little teepee or little house, that's all you had was each other. And it was time of really bonding with your family. And again, telling stories that were told over and over and over. But, you know, the people would continue to laugh. We have family stories that doesn't matter how many times we hear them, we end up killing ourselves laughing because just the way it's told and the fact that it's the story. Yeah. It's one of our stories. Yeah.
Surviving with love and comedy and curiosity. Yeah.
And tomorrow, the women are going to have a sweat lodge and we're going to sit in the lodge and we're going to sing. We're going to pray for ourselves, for our families, our communities, our nations, and just be stronger as women together in the sweat.
That's beautiful.
Sweat lodge. Yeah.
A big misconception with this season, I feel, is a time of survival. Right? And in a lot of cases, especially back then, absolutely. But just like you said, it's also a time for introspection, and that's the big teaching behind these different seasons. It's not how to survive; it's how to learn more about yourself. Yeah. Being in that silence, being in that peace, can create loneliness, especially if you're not used to looking at these different thoughts. It's like a tea kettle that boils over, right? And which forces you to look at that other version of yourself, all of your different actions that you've tried to push down, especially in this age with all these different distractions that we can push in front of our faces to keep ourselves from those voices. It can be really hard for a lot of people, but it's needed.
It can be really hard.
Yeah. Just
it
like
can
with
be
the
hardest
seasons.
most of all for street-involved people.
Yeah.
You know, in my Sabi, the truthful Sasquatch story, I drew on, you know, what our part of it was, you know, I've seen how people react when someone street involved comes into a restaurant or a mall or a store when they're cold, when all they need is just a few minutes to get warm. I've seen that, you know, and how they're always asked to leave. And yeah, I really think about this time of the year for street-involved people.
That story hits home, especially with the way that you just described that. It's, with the teaching of the Sasquatch is to understand truth, right? So seeing that mirrored with the people, our most vulnerable parts of the community that are out on the street right now, you need to remember that this could be you in a second. This could be any one of us.
Yes.
With one wrong thing that could happen in a month or a week or just a moment that pushes you out onto the street. It could be literally anything.
One bad month, one bad week, one bad decision. And, you know, could be us.
Yeah.
You're right.
There needs to be an understanding of putting yourself in those shoes and what you can do to help those people that are in need. Right.
It always makes me... I always watch, you know, sometimes you'll be watching something or following a thread or on Facebook and there'll be a poor little starving puppy, frozen puppy, and how all these, I'll take it or I'll do this. And is he okay? You know, I've got food, I've got water. But if it's a homeless person, a human,
there's so many misconceptions. Yeah, absolutely.
You don't see that. Is he okay? No, then it goes to our government and our thanks Trudeau and our mayor, and you know, it's funny. It's funny how humanity works sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's always pushing the blame onto something else, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we see that all the misconceptions we also see with our different Indigenous communities as well. It's a lot of weird stuff.
Absolutely.
Something we teach to the program that I do up in Rocky as well is looking at all these stereotypes and from Indigenous women to Indigenous men, children, two-spirited individuals, and understanding that there's discrimination everywhere.
Yeah.
But we don't have to identify with any of it.
You don't.
Yeah, just like with the teachings of our winter season too, like we don't have to identify ourselves with all of these crazy thoughts that are in our head.
No.
You can, the most important way to deal with it is to personify yourself outside of those, and then view them almost as if it's outside of a window in a cafe, right? Which ones do you resonate with the most? For me, the way that I like to describe it is I'm sitting inside of a cafe watching a parade go by. Some of the floats I really love. Some of them I'm like, okay, that's weird. I would never think about putting that in a parade. And those are, it's the same thing with your thoughts. We all have those intrusive thoughts.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that's who you are. Right.
Sometimes I have to really pick my battles.
Yeah.
And choose not to engage. For me, I've really, really had to work on that. And remember that it all comes back.
Yeah.
What you put out, what I do affects you, what you do affects me.
It's that constant cycle that everything has to live by, right? You can't break away from that. We all have that passion of fire that sparks up with certain things, right? But it's what hill do you want to die on, right?
Yeah, so exactly.
Looking into the future, I'd love to ask you where you see the teaching of water and the teaching of the elements really pushing forward with our youth.
When I talk to the story I speak around adults is very different from the story I speak around our young people about the future and water and our earth. I'm very careful. I try to surround myself with like-minded people, and what can we do? What can we do that just starts with us, and maybe it'll radiate out a little bit and try and do something. What can we do? I find with youth, I choose to be very, very careful because I see in our youth nowadays this high level of anxiety and high level of fear and high level of what's going to be there for me. If we're fighting about no clean water right now, what's going to happen when I have kids? So when I talk with youth or the younger people, I really, really maintain an attitude of hope because I want them to be hopeful and I want them to know that their life is precious and worthy and that there will be good things for them. I don't want to put any more pressure on youth nowadays than we've already handed them.
Yeah.
I think we were kind of wrong in some ways going, you're our future. We're relying on you. Your kids are our future.
Yeah.
I don't think we should be saying that to them. I think we should be saying you're our now.
Yeah.
You're here, you're now. And let's, we'll figure this out together.
That's a really beautiful way to put that, honestly. It's none of this change happens in the future. All of this change happens right now. What can we do right in this moment? And the passing of the torch is a constant phrase that we hear through every generation, right? But we see the extremes that have been happening from generation to generation are getting more extreme as the generations pass on. So obviously something needs to change. And focusing on the present, which is what a lot of our different Indigenous teachings are teaching us, right? From our medicine wheel to our 7 sacred teachings, it's all teaching us how to get back into our bodies and to live a better life right now, not in the future, right? You're not focusing on the future. So
that's right.
So you spoke on the sweat that is going on tomorrow. If someone is, on the edge, or if they're like right in the middle of their learning journey, they don't really know where to go in Red Deer. Would there be any good resources to go to really connect with culture?
There's a couple of entities in Red Deer that every time if you call Safe Harbor Society and ask to be put on the blanket sweat lodge list, every time there's a sweat, that they shoot out that big email.
Oh, amazing.
Such and such a day, you know.
Yeah.
It's a men's sweat, it's a youth sweat, it's a woman's sweat. Friendship Center sometimes knows, Urban Indigenous Voices knows usually. We have a way.
Yeah. That's good. With those organizations too, there's always help that can be had and stuff like that. So just like with talking with your elders, just walk in and start a conversation.
That's it.
And see where things go. Right? It's just a big vortex. When you put it out there that you want to learn, it'll happen. But you need to take the steps to show up, right?
Yeah. So when it's time, the teacher comes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Awesome.
Wow.
Well, thank you so much again for coming down for this and wanting to be a part of this. And it's so amazing that we get to end off the season with you and having this conversation with you, Corky, and looking into the next year. Is there anything that you're super excited about that's coming up here? I know we were able to share a bit about your book that you came out with.
In the next year, I have another book on the back burner, and it's to help children understand why we smudge and what each element of the smudge means, and actually goes back to what we talked about: the water, the fire, the air, and the earth. So the earth being the tobacco, the water represented by the shell we use sometimes, the match that has the spirit of the sun to light the medicine of that comes from the earth. Like it's a really good little way of teaching. But I find a lot of people smudge, will go through the motions, but don't really know what it means.
Absolutely.
And it's a very, very simple ceremony, but it's very, very important. It's an important one. And, that's one of the things I will poke hard at. I will no longer, if people ask me to come help out in any way, used to be I would go, can I smudge? And if they said, no, we're not allowed to, but there is a parking lot, I'll go, well, sorry, you're going to have to find somebody else.
Yeah.
And now I've gotten to the point where I don't even ask. I just smudge.
That's good. I know there's like different allergies and stuff like that, but there's always at least one that's just like I don't like smudge. It makes my head feel weird. I'm like,
and there's always one who
it's like maybe I don't know. Yeah. Breathe it in.
And the thing is, you don't need a lot to smudge.
No, you really don't.
You don't need like a big handful of sage. Just a little bit will do just the same job.
That's a big learning curve that I had to go through as well. I was making these big balls of it and stuff like that, and it's I had one elder come up to me.
My husband too.
It's the male the male teaching, I guess, to conserve. Yeah. I had an elder come up to me and it's like, whoa, what are you doing? You're burning the whole branch. I'm like, oh, no, that's not, no, I'm so sorry. And he just took the little one like that and rolled it up in his hand. And the motion of doing that, I honestly just love. The smell comes out so much more when you do that too.
And those are things you learn. Lighting sweetgrass is hard, but if you pull it apart a little bit, it'll light good. You learn that as you go along.
Yeah,
little things like that.
Yeah, just keep showing up to the ceremony and striking those conversations, and just be present. Just keep watching.
Yeah,
right? And it'll connect and stuff.
I'm sure my husband and I were the most annoying people. We went to every ceremony, every sweat, because we just wanted it so bad.
Yeah.
And it felt so good and so right to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a big learning curve with that too. It's just understanding what feels good for your body and what doesn't feel good for your body, right? It's your intuition will tell you everything that you need in regards to what your spiritual connection is, or like what your why is. What I like to say to people a lot is I ask them, what's your why? Like why are you here right now talking to me? Like what brought you here in the first place? What do you believe in? And a lot of people can't give me a solid answer.
Exactly.
And that's perfectly fine, but just keep asking yourself that. And when you start understanding that more and more and more, your physical health and your mental health and your emotional health will start flowing in regards to what your North Star is, right?
And I find that with young people, that their question is, why am I here? Where did I come from? What's my purpose? Where am I going?
Yeah.
You know, and earlier you learn that as a young person, the easier the path will be.
Yeah. Yeah. And for my own journey, starting to understand and starting to take the steps to really know where I came from, and more importantly, who came before me. That's when I started understanding what my identity was. Yeah. But for me, it didn't take hold until the last few years. Like I started my journey reconnecting to my Indigenous side when I was 25. And it wasn't until the last 2 years where it really started showing me that the steps to go through with that, right? But I'm more confident than ever in my own identity now. And I can look back at my child self and understand that child self is looking up at me really, really happy of what I've turned into and what I'm turning into, right?
Yeah. So, you're a pretty cool guy, Tyler.
Oh, you're pretty cool as well, Corky. Awesome. Well, where can we find your book right now?
Well, you know what? I just found out, and I did not know this, that my book is on Amazon.
Amazon. Oh.
Yeah. Well, somebody could have told me.
Holy crap. You should look into
it. Carrywood Nature Center carries it, I think, and I have it. And I can't think of anybody else right now. Friendship Center used to have it. But you know what? This book's been around. It's been a few years since this came out. And it's just to the point where I think, oh my goodness, everybody in Red Deer and area must have this book. And then all of a sudden it just, there's this little resurgence. And it's, it's again teaching young people the ceremony and the power of the circle. And that when we all sit in a circle, sometimes the very best thing we can do is just listen. And that that I try to tell young people, you have a voice, and you have a right to use your voice, but you have a responsibility to use it in a good way. Not by being mad and stomping around and screaming and yelling. Use your voice in a good way. Before you have to raise your voice.
Yeah.
And how you should feel safe in that circle. And if you don't feel like talking, you don't have to talk.
Yeah.
But if you find you build your own sacred circle, you always have a place to feel safe.
Absolutely. Just reconnecting that heart brain to your brain, right?
Yep.
Having the wisdom to know when to pull back and when to speak up. It's that balance that we find with all of our different teachings. Too much fire burns you. It creates forest fires, right? And too much water can even drown you, but just enough.
That's why when we say our prayers, make our prayers for water, we always pray for water for us to have enough water in balance. We don't, if you pray for water and get a flood, then it's out of balance, So we always pray just enough.
Yeah.
Even when we pick berries in the fall, we don't clear them all out. We make sure we have enough that are left for the birds and the animals, and enough that'll fall to the ground and possibly grow new berry bushes.
Absolutely.
And we never ever take anything from the earth without leaving something.
Creating relationships opposed to gaining resources, right? Same thing with our picking of sage as well. If we don't give back the seeds to that crop, then in a couple of seasons there's going to be nothing left.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for being a part of this podcast and being a part of what this message is all about. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of your different journeys and with writing, and they better be bringing you back for more of these readings down here as well. This is a beautiful area.
Yeah, wasn't it fun? It was a good day. I'm really, really glad.
Me as well.
Yeah,
awesome.
It turned out really good.